flower shop I worked in was closing down. I desperately looked for another job. I found an open position at a flower farm, as luck would have it. When I called the flower farm, they arranged an interview for me. I won't bore you with the details, so I'm going to skip to after I got the job. Due to the flower farm's location, I had to move to the countryside. The house I moved to was smaller than my original home, but the beautiful environment and clean air made it all worth it. By the time I'd settled in, I had a couple of days before my first day on the job. I went for a walk one morning as the weather was pleasant. Behind my house was a vast clearing. I decided to walk in a straight line from my house to avoid getting lost. I didn't expect to find anything, save for a few animals and trees. About 5 minutes into my walk, I spotted something from a distance. As I got closer, I realized that it was a playhouse. Based on its condition, I could tell that it was abandoned a long time ago. As I examined the playhouse further, I noticed other peculiarities. The first was the size of the playhouse. The dimensions were twice the size of a normal one. I would know because I had a playhouse when I was a kid. I also saw that the door and windows were boarded up from the outside. Above the door was a sign that read, Zoey's Playhouse. I concluded that Zoey was the kid who owned this playhouse. What I couldn't understand was what the playhouse was doing there, or, more importantly, why it was boarded up. Since there were no cries for help or smell of rotten meat coming from the playhouse, I thought to leave it be. One day, I was on my break with another employee when I mentioned the playhouse. It turned out that my coworker knew Zoey and her family. About 17 years ago, a family moved into my neighborhood. The family consisted of Zoey, her parents, and her older sister, Jasmine. Zoey's family was once very wealthy, but when the mother's company suddenly went under, they had to move somewhere cheaper. Zoey's playhouse was one of the few things the family had left from their old life. Zoey was spoiled and didn't adapt to her new life. My coworker learned from the parents that they kept the playhouse because it was Zoey's most cherished possession. They thought that by keeping this one thing, Zoey would be content with everything. Sadly, that was not the case. Every day, Zoey complained about the new living situation. The worst of it was how she blamed her mother for everything. Zoey would scream at her mother, accusing her of laziness and not handling her business correctly. She was never punished for her cruelty, as the family believed that it would only make things worse. This went on for days, until the house was finally quiet. The neighbors thought that Zoey had finally calmed down and accepted everything as it was. But then they learned that Zoey was missing. When the police looked into it, they deduced that Zoey had run away. They never found her. Time passed, and Zoey's family managed to get back on their feet. They weren't rich, but they were able to move somewhere better. By then, Zoey was declared dead and was never seen again. I felt sorry for the family. This story explained everything except for one. I'd understand if abandoning the playhouse was the family's attempt to heal from the tragedy. But why blockade it from the outside? My coworker and I couldn't think of a single reason. My coworker told me that he had a crowbar and offered to help solve this mystery. When I saw the boarded-up playhouse, I figured that there was nothing inside except maybe a child-sized dining set or something. But after hearing that story, I had to investigate. For all I knew, there could have been a clue as to what happened to Zoey. The flower farm closed, and my coworker and I drove to his house to retrieve his crowbar. By then, it was dark out, so we had to grab a couple of flashlights too. My coworker and I then parked at my place, and I led him to the playhouse. He was examining the playhouse when we heard a soft voice. My coworker and I froze. We listened quietly, wondering if it was our imagination. When we heard it again, it dawned on us that it was a small child. I shined my flashlight through the window and looked through one of the gaps. Inside was a little girl. She was sitting on her knees, sobbing while facing away from me. Her dress was bloody, and she was covered in bruises. Mortified, I urged my coworker to get the door open. Only when he started prying did the girl turn to me. I gasped when I saw her face. She looked pale and badly beaten. I would have pried those boards off with my bare hands had I not witnessed what the girl did next. She got up, the sound of bones breaking enacted from her joints. Her limbs began to stretch as she crawled towards me. I recoiled as her arm reached out through the window. My coworker dropped his crowbar in fear when he saw what was happening. We retreated to my house and stayed inside until morning. We talked amongst each other about what happened and developed a theory. After days of enduring Zoe's tantrums, her family finally snapped and killed her. They then stashed her body somewhere and kept it there until after the police investigation. When they finished searching her house, the family took the Playhouse to the clearing, threw Zoe's body in there, and boarded it up. That thing we saw must have been her. Only then did I understand why the Playhouse was boarded up. I hope that nobody ever goes near that cursed Playhouse again.